1. During my sophomore year of college, I had 5 other roommates. One of them, we'll call her Kamari, took a special liking to me. She was about 5 feet, weighed around 250 pounds, and dressed in boys' clothing. She had also told us how she would get asked if she was a lesbian, and it hurt her feelings because she insisted she was straight. I had great sympathy for her, and would stick up for her if she got teased. During this time I was dating. I think I was just his booty call, a guy that I liked but didn't treat me very well. I just could not get over him and would go crawling back every time he began to show interest in me again. Kamari really did not like him. She said she wanted to hook me up with the guy she went to high school with, to help me get over this dirtbag. I went to Kamari's hometown with her one weekend, when me and Keegan were supposed to initially meet. He ended up being a no-show, and Kamari apologized to me a lot about it. While we were driving home, she gets a call from Keegan, saying he was really sorry he couldn't meet up with us. He got lost with his family while they were camping, but he still wanted to hang out at some point. Kamari would talk to Keegan on the phone a few times. Eventually, I asked if I could have his number so that I could talk to him myself, rather than her saying things for me. She said that she would give him my number and have him get a hold of me. Well, turns out his phone got cancelled around the same time. His parents wanted him to get his own plans since he was no longer living with them. Instead, he emailed me. We talked that way for a week or so, then he got a texting app on his iPod. We would text and email each other back and forth constantly. He would send me songs of him singing and playing his guitar and pictures of himself. He said he didn't have a Facebook because he thought it caused too much drama. Skyping had never occurred to me because I didn't have Skype myself. I told him everything about me. Private things I wouldn't share with my roommates. We even had steamy sexting conversations. We would talk about meeting up and what that would be like. It wasn't an easy feat because he lived about 2 hours away and I didn't have a car back then. He said he really wanted to come down, but he wanted to save up to get us a hotel room for the weekend. Remember, I had 5 roommates. Finally, a day came when he was going to come down. I was ecstatic. It was crazy how much I had fallen for this guy when I had never actually met him in person. The night before he was supposed to come down, he suddenly stopped texting me. Hours later, he tells me his dad had a serious heart attack and he wouldn't be able to visit. I was sad, of course, but I was sympathetic and tried to comfort him. I had someone pass away from a heart attack not long before we started talking, so I knew what he was going through. Well, a few months go on like this, where there's always this reason or that reason he can't visit. Eventually, I start to notice that Kamari is getting texts when I send one to Keegan, and I don't get a text until she sends one. I could not come to terms with the possibility that I was talking to her the whole time. I learned in psychology class about a disorder where people think they are never talking to who they mean to send messages to. I actually start to think I'm going crazy. One day I was searching on Facebook for Keegan's siblings' profiles to see if they had any recent pictures of Keegan. That's when I spotted Keegan's Facebook. Why would he lie to me about having one? I begin to scroll through all of his history. He has posts about going snowboarding on days that he was telling me he was at work, among other discrepancies. I confront him about it. At first he denied it. Then he said he did have one, but he didn't use it often. When I said he posted something nearly every day, he said he was done with us. Just to add salt to the wound, he also told me he had been sleeping with multiple other girls while talking to me. Deciding after that point I really had nothing to lose, I asked my other roommates if they thought there was even a possibility that Kamari could have been pretending to be Keegan. Surprisingly, they did, and they had been suspicious for a while, but didn't say anything. We confronted her about it. I'd like to say I was calm and tried to be understanding, but I went ballistic. She cried and was incredulous that I could think so low of her. We were relentless, however. The truth finally came out. I had no compassion. I told her I wanted her to move out, or I would. She did. I still don't know what she told her parents to have them agree to let her leave mid-semester. I don't know what she told her friends, but they started avoiding me after that. I don't know how she was able to fake those phone calls early on either. I messaged the real Keegan and asked if he really knew Kamari and a little about the story. He never replied. I haven't seen Kamari since, but I know that she still goes to the same university now. 2. This happened in Paris, France. I'm female and was a lot younger at the time. I was in a crazy bad relationship with the man of my life. Passionately in love, but we were arguing and not getting on. I was full of doubt and worried that the relationship might be coming to an end. I had stress at work and was just in a really bad place at the time. So one day I decided to go and see a clairvoyant. Yep. I have no explanation for this, except I was desperate and obviously a little crazy at the time, and I wanted this clairvoyant to tell me everything was going to be alright. Believe me, I no longer believe in any of that shit. So just like that, I found a clairvoyant from the phone book online and phoned to make an appointment. A woman answered, and I made an appointment for that evening. I did realize I was going to a house I had never been to before, to meet someone I did not know. So I called a friend to tell him where I was going, just in case. I was not totally dumb. I drove to the suburb. I got to the apartment block and buzzed on the name given to me. And fuck me, Vincent van Gogh opened the door. He had the whole VVG vibe. He was small and slight and looked shifty as hell. He couldn't maintain eye contact with me. I asked him where Mrs. van Gogh was, and he told me she was his wife and she was inside and he'd take me to her. And you know what? I went in with him because I was too polite not to. I entered the apartment. I followed him down a corridor. I was realizing how stupid I was. I was already scared and was trying to take in the environment. It was very small but clean, neat, and tidy. My memory is not completely clear, but from the front door, there might have been 4 rooms off to the right. Lots of stuff going on. Any space was crammed with furniture, objects, shelves with books. It wasn't dim, it was lit with an electric light, but there was no natural light. Vincent takes me into a room, 2nd or 3rd door on the right. There may have been 1 or 2 other rooms towards the end of the corridor. This was a very small apartment. I entered the room and fucking freaked out. I was in a room which contained a double bed along the right-hand wall, loads more shelves with trinkets all over them, a sofa to the left of this very small room, a table and 2 chairs against the far wall, 1 large window almost the entire length of the room to the left. Sat at the table was Mrs. van Gogh. She was fat with dyed black hair, lots of makeup, and was wearing a pair of black diamante horn-rimmed glasses. Rose West. Vincent left the room, and I sat down. I was trying to keep an eye on where Vincent was. Rose and I started chatting. She started doing her analysis and asking me questions and stuff. I was giving it all away, still fully aware with my senses highly tuned. As I sat talking to her, I realized that the external roller shutters over the window were almost fully down with only a small space at the bottom to see out of. Anyway, I look out of the window and realize I was looking out onto the floor of a car park, meaning my eye level was leveled with the floor of the outdoor car park. I was almost underground. So I am now realizing I was in this apartment, in a fucking bedroom underground, with the shutters closed. Sat chatting to fucking Rose West, with Vincent van Gogh lurking around somewhere. Rose continued her questioning and advising me. She then asks me if I had ever had any gynecological trouble. Fuck, alarm, alarm, alarm! And guess what? Just at that moment, Vincent comes back into the room and sits on the sofa. I started to tremble. I was getting really scared. Vincent is sat there. He is not looking at me, he is staring at the opposite wall. In his hands, he's got a white cloth, I swear. I was thinking chloroform. Then, still looking at the wall, he tells me that he thinks I might have gynecological problems. I'm thinking, fuck, they're going to offer a physical examination right there on that fucking bed. That was it. I stood up. I just said, I'm going, I'll pay you, and I'm leaving. I was shaking. All the get the fuck out of there signals were blasting out to me. I paid her. Vincent stood. She stood. They both left the room, turning left onto the corridor towards the front door. I followed. I swear those 5 seconds following them down that corridor were probably the scariest in my life. I followed. My mind was in fucking Navy SEAL survival mode. I just couldn't believe that they would just open the door and let me out. They did. I drove back home to the center of Paris. I got to my apartment where my guy sat with his friend, smoking a joint and drinking a beer. I have never been so happy to see 2 normal guys in my life. 3. This is without a doubt the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I've only told a few people, but feel like I need to share it here in case it helps any students traveling abroad to be more cautious. So a little background first. This happened to me about 5 years ago when I was 19 and studying abroad in Italy. Our school had its own campus, about an hour outside of Rome in a quiet town, where the Pope has a summer place. Part of our school's program in Italy was that we had to leave campus for 10 days to vacation and explore Europe in October. Everyone was split off into their friend groups and travel. I didn't really have a group I was attached to, but not wanting to go by myself, I asked these 2 girls I was friendly with if I could travel with them. They were best friends and roommates and were nice enough and said I could go with them. We decided to travel from Rome to Austria, Prague and Germany via Eurail train. We went the entire trip, having fun and without incident, until the last day, which is where my awful experience begins. On our last day, we were in Munich, meeting up with most of our class as a school tradition of sorts. The 2 girls I was traveling with and I had tickets to take the overnight train that night, back to Rome from Munich, left around midnight. During the day, one of the girls tells me that she had changed her plans. 10 days ago before we left, and was going to stay in Munich overnight and come back the next day, which was a surprise to me, but I still wasn't that worried because she was joining up with her classmates and staying in a booked hostel with them. And I would still be traveling with this other girl. Then, to my dismay, the other girl says she is changing her mind and staying overnight in Munich too. I asked her where she planned to stay, as we hadn't booked a room in a hostel. She said she would sneak into the hostel and share a bed with the other girl. I told her that I was really uncomfortable traveling alone, and that it wasn't fair for her to abandon me like that. She told me nonchalantly that I could just find a hostel and book another ticket if I cared so much. I told her I didn't have the extra money to pay for a separate ticket back to Rome, let alone a hostel in addition to that. I was a college student on a very tight budget, and had already spent a lot on this trip, and didn't have enough in my bank account. Despite my pleas, those petty girls said essentially that it was not their problem and ditched me. Luckily, we had already met up with another group of our classmates who felt bad for me and spent the entire last day of our vacation running all around Munich, trying to find me a hostel to stay at that night, and even offered to pull together money to help me pay for a ticket back. Unfortunately, it was Oktoberfest in Germany, and literally every hostel was completely booked up, and despite my attempts to sneak into my friends' hostels with them, I was stopped and thrown out. At this point, it's night time. I was defeated and worried, but my other classmates who had tried to help me were still sticking with me. I figured at this point the only options I had were to sleep outside on a bench in Munich, Totally unsafe and ridiculous. Or take the overnight train back to Rome by myself. Not super safe, but I figured I'd be around other people, so maybe not completely awful. So I decided to go ahead and take the overnight train back to Rome by myself. And my classmates walked me to the station and saw me on the train. P.S. Those guys ended up being some of my closest friends in years to come. So now I'm on this overnight train by myself, and I head to my carriage. The way it was set up is that it was a room off a hallway with 6 seats, no beds because trying to save money. I was the first one in my carriage, and so I sit next to the window on one side, and I put my giant backpacker's pack, which was my only luggage, on the 2 seats next to me. Eventually 2 German guys in their 30s come in, and are polite enough to sit opposite me. They converse with each other, they've got their suitcases, etc., and are looking at maps of Rome and tourist things to do. I feel safe enough with these guys since they're minding their own business. This is where it gets bad. I settle in and listen to music and try to sleep for a bit. And perhaps after an hour or so, I start to notice there's a super sketchy guy standing right outside our carriage in the middle of the hallway staring at me. I'm completely freaked out because 1, no one is supposed to just be in the hallway standing there. You're either on your way to the loo or headed back to your carriage. Why would anyone just be standing in the hallway? 2, he didn't break eye contact with me once I looked at him. He just kept staring at me with a sinister look on his face, like he wanted to eat me up. So I am kind of freaking out and try to look away and pretend like I didn't really notice him. I wait a bit to see if he was just a normal guy going to or from the loo or something. But when I look back, he's still there, hasn't moved, and is still leering at me from behind the window door of my carriage. I want to go shut the curtains to our carriage so he can't look in, but I don't want to get close to him or piss him off or anything. So I turn to the 2 German guys and quietly tell them that the guy there is creeping me out and staring at me and making me uncomfortable, and ask if one of them could casually, in a minute or so, close the curtains. I hoped they'd be men and kinda protect me and tell the guy to bugger off or whatever, but they seemed annoyed at me and mumbled that they would, but never did. When I brought it up again, they kinda acted miffed, but eventually shut the curtain. I thought that surely would have deterred the guy from lurking and soon fell asleep. A few hours later, I awoke to 3 young Germans in their mid to late 20s, joining our carriage in the 3 remaining seats. As they come in, I notice that the creepy guy from before is still there, standing outside my door. I kind of freak out and really don't feel comfortable at all, and I'm a bit panicky. I try to talk to the younger Germans, but they weren't very friendly, and perhaps didn't speak English well. It's been hours at this point, and I notice that I really have to pee. But the only way for me to get to the loo is to go outside of the carriage, and down the hallway to the loo at the very end of the train, a bit away from the other carriages with people. I notice that when the younger Germans came in, they moved the curtain a bit so I can see the creepy dude standing out there, leering at me still. He refuses to go away. I notice that when people walk by to use the loo or whatever, he kinda acts casual, like he's waiting for someone or something, and looks away from my carriage. But once they're gone, he's back at it again. I try to hold it in as long as I can. But this is like a 12-hour train ride, and it would be another 4 hours or more before we made it to Rome. And there was no way I was going to make it. At this point, everyone in my carriage has been asleep for a long time, and I don't want to wake anyone. I have to nudge the young Germans on my way out of the carriage to go to the loo, and I try to tell them that I'm going to the loo and could they just keep an eye on me and the creepy lurker. And they brush me off like I'm a jerk for waking them up. And they go back to sleep. I exit the carriage, freaked out of my mind, and also about to pee my pants, and of course, I basically run into the creepy dude standing outside my carriage. There's hardly any room in the hallway, and he is not giving me any space, and is staring me down. I'm 5'4", and he was towering over me like 6'2" or something, burly. So I do my best to book it to the loo as fast as I can, and lock the door behind me. My heart is racing, and I'm going as fast as I can so that hopefully he hasn't followed me there. But alas, I get out of the loo and he is right there with this disgusting smile on his face. I mean, I don't like to exaggerate, but there was evil in his eyes and it chilled me. I was sick to my stomach. I tried to squeeze by him quickly, and he started to press himself against me. I gave him my nastiest face and yelled at him, "Let me go!" And praise tiny baby Jesus, there was a man headed to the loo my way just then. So the creepy dude moved off me and I booked it back to my carriage, where I proceeded to stay for the remainder of the ride. I had thought that my outburst and little scene I caused would have deterred that sketchy guy from creeping on me anymore. But when I looked up at some point, I noticed he was right back where he was, in the hallway, staring at me. At this point, I was kinda in disbelief that someone could be this blatantly lecherous. So I started to wonder if there was actually a seat out in the hallway that was cheaper than a shared carriage. But then I realized that when I had left to go to the bathroom earlier, I had seen no seats. Duh, hazard. And I also remembered one unsettling detail too. This guy had no luggage, not even a briefcase. This was a 12-plus hour trip from Germany to Rome, so everyone on this train was either coming or going from a work or pleasure trip. But all of them had at least a small travel suitcase of sorts. So the fact that this guy had no luggage or briefcase or anything on him, and was just standing in the hallway staring at me, made my stomach drop. This man did not have good intentions, and I couldn't rationalize it any other way. I spent the last hour or so of the trip devising my plan for once the train arrived in Rome. I knew the train station there very well, and knew that the metro train I needed to transfer to, get back to my campus, was down several flights of stairs, and around more than a few twists and turns. I felt pretty confident, so when the train stopped, I had my backpack on ready to go. The other Germans got out of the train ahead of me, and the creepy guy had to move for them to pass out. I quickly followed in between them and jumped off the train and booked it through the station without looking behind me. Thank God it was crowded in the station, with people heading to work, etc. So I felt safe that I was disguised in the crowd. I flew down the flights of stairs and around the turns without stopping. When I finally got down the platform for the local metro train I needed, I felt safe. I was just catching my breath when I saw none other than the creepy guy come down the stairs and look around for me. When he saw me, he had that evil, lecherous look in his eye, and I wanted to cry. I grabbed tightly onto my pocket knife in my coat pocket and made my way to a group of harmless-looking Italians and tried to stand in their group. They seemed annoyed that I was standing so close to them. I don't know, maybe it was my giant backpack or my scared, sweaty disheveledness. Who knows? I was standing still, about several train car lengths away from him at this point. But he was starting to make his way over to me, just as the train pulled up. I hopped on my car immediately, and tried to position myself near some folks who rudely kept scooting away from me. I noticed he got on a few cars away. As the car was moving, he made his way down his car into the next, and with each stop the train made, he got a little closer to me. I myself moved the cars down away from him, but I grew increasingly worried that the farther outside of the Metro Rome area, the fewer people were on the train, and the closer he was getting to me. When I had made it to the first car, I realized I had nowhere else to go. I looked and noticed he was only one car away from me, and headed my way. As we pulled into the next stop, I grasped my pocket knife tightly and made a last-ditch effort to evade him and got off the train. I looked to my right, and to my horror, he had gotten off as well and was briskly running towards me. As the last few people shoved past me to get on the train, I realized I had no options left and threw myself back and dove into the train without breaking eye contact with this sicko as the doors to the train closed in front of him, and I realized I had made it safely onto the train, leaving him on the platform, fuming and yelling as the train sped off. Not really believing I had made it safely, I spent the rest of the metro ride still in fight-or-flight mode, and dashed upstairs to my above-ground bus up to my campus, making sure I was sitting next to a sweet old lady. The creepy dude never showed up on the bus, and once I had made it back inside my campus's walls, I immediately fell to the ground and sobbed. I realized I was so incredibly lucky that I evaded what was probably a certain kidnapping, rape, murder even, who knows. But I have never forgotten that man's face, and the look in his eye, and how it made me feel like I wanted to peel my skin off and crawl under a rock and die. I ended up telling my ordeal to the dean of our campus and pleaded for him to reprimand those 2 girls who abandoned me and forced me into a compromising position, which was completely unsafe. I wanted the dean to tell all the students and future students that it is never okay to let someone travel alone, especially females, and especially since most of us were young and felt invincible, and were just plain naive and stupid and didn't know what was safe and what wasn't. But that weasel of a dean thought I was overreacting, and that I was probably asking for it. Yeah, it was a school that victim-blamed and thought leggings were impure, and thought the girls that abandoned me were goody-goodies and I was some loose rebel who got herself into this position. He never addressed it, that SOB. I haven't heard of anyone else at my school getting into situations like me, but I've made sure to tell all the girls and guys who were in years below me to be careful when they study abroad, and to not do what those girls did to me. I hope this helps someone in some way, and if you ever see a man traveling a long distance without any luggage or briefcase at all, be wary. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 164. What a bunch of dicks in that last story. Thankfully it worked out okay in the end, but dicks everywhere. The useless kind too. Well. I would of course like to say thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use the stories in this video. Thank you very much, it is greatly appreciated. Okay, let's see, this would be... I'm losing track of the days. This is Wednesday this goes up, I think. Right, so we'll have some glitch stories tomorrow. We'll have some paranormal on Friday. And hopefully TIFUs on Saturday. I think I've got enough. Actually, yeah, I think I've got enough, even with just subscriber stories alone. I should have about enough. So that should be okay. And... with that, I think I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.